Welcome to Triangle BNI. Today's show is brought to you by Simply Done Concierge. We talk all the time, folks. How can we be in two places at once? Well, with the certified team at Simply Done Concierge, you can go do what you need to do, and they'll come in, help you at your house, do some shopping, do some pet sitting, do some meal prep, things like that. So you can be two places at once and get more things done during the day. You go to simplydoneconcierge.com, send them a note of what you need. I know they'll be able to help. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Manning. Each week on Triangle BNI, we bring you a local small business success story. If you are not familiar with BNI, it is Business Networking International, the world's largest networking organization. Our little slice of heaven here in the Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and the surrounding towns. We have 33 chapters, soon to be 34 chapters that meet each week, about 570 ish members. And our goal is to help each other grow their business. Our local small business success story this week is Lee Smith with the Tarva Group. Lee is in RD25, the Smithfield Strategy. They meet Tuesday mornings at 8:15 at the Building Industry Association facility in Smithfield. And Lee, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well, Mike. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on with you.
Glad to have you. You do one of the coolest things that I've seen in BNI in a while. I'm not gifted enough to do it, but I'm fascinated by people that do it. So the Tarva Group does a number of things: the aerial services, digital media, and professional development. But
That is correct. Yes.
yep, Lee holds the drone aerial services seat in BNI because BNI is seat specific. And so I'm just every time I see you, I think of three new questions to ask because I'm just fascinated by this world. You do a great job of explaining to people if you need a 3D look at something, because in life, if we're walking on the ground, everything is 2D. But in your world, you can give us a view of things we'd never thought of seeing from that angle.
That's correct. Yeah. Our two big things with aerial photography. One is perspective, obviously. It really changes the way you see what you're seeing. You're seeing patterns that you normally don't see from the ground. You're able to show a broader perspective. And so because of that, we love to be able to tell people's story using that change in perspective and market folks in that way.
And I'm intrigued by that because normally when we think of drones, we think over a building, over a golf course, if there's a golf tournament, now that we see those more and more, or just, people kind of, playing with them around their house. But the more I talk to you and the more I read up on this, I'm starting to think about farms and big construction sites where you can't, even if you just wanted to count all the vehicles you had, you now can do that for that owner, can't you?
Absolutely. The technology has advanced so much. I've been flying drones for right at 13 years now. And when I first started flying drones, drones were just something fun that you did. It just was something like, they were basically made out of foam with a little electric motor in them, and you crashed them and you broke them and you went and bought another one. Even though that another one may have been a few $100s at the time, now we're looking at drones that are in the tens of thousands of dollars, some of them, and the technology has just advanced so much in the industry and in these last decade plus, and you can do so much more with them. You can object track with them, you can subject track with them, you can do three-dimensional modeling with them. I mean, literally, no pun intended, but the sky really is the limit when it comes to what you can do with them.
Yeah. Um, it had just dawned on me as I was reading up on some things over the weekend, just the things you can use it for now that, and again, we've never had even a 500-foot look at what we own. I know I chuckle and I think I'm correct on this. So I don't think I'm outing anybody, but I've heard tell that there are roofers who are afraid of heights. So they send their drone up above the house to look at the roof. And I'm thinking, like, that's going to tell me about 60% of what I know, right?
That's correct. That is correct. Yes, sir.
I mean, you kind of got to put your hands on some industries. Yep.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, we can put a drone up and we can get real close, but sometimes you actually have to put the hands actually on the roof in order to be able to see some things.
What got your first drone in your hands?
For me, honestly, it was just something fun to do. Like I said, going on 13 years, I've always loved aviation. Always loved being around the industry, and so for me, it started out as something fun. And then as I began to be part of the aviation industry more and more, I was actually I'm still am involved in the Civil Air Patrol, and I was having a conversation with one of our squadron leaders one day, and he said, you do this anyway, right? With different other areas in your business, why don't you make this a separate division in aerial servicing? And the more I looked into it, the more I realized exactly how much could be done with the drone. And obviously, the technology had gone from just something fun that you do to show someone a neat picture, which back then a neat picture was a lot lower quality, lower resolution than what we can provide now with a 4K image. But it was something fun then. So now, as we look at it in the industry, we're talking $16 billion plus industry every year. I mean, that's a huge slice of the business pie. And so, when you look at that and you look at what you can do in that, that's the more I read, the more I got into it, the more I realized, hey, this is something I really love to do. And it's like I told my wife one day, literally I had a full day from one drone shoot to the next, and I got to the end of the day, and I mean, I was tired. You're out in the sun, it's hot. I said, this is what I love to do. And I said, if I could have a day like today where I can not only help people get their message out, but spend a lot of time seeing things from a perspective that not anyone can see, man, it's a great day. And so, that's just what continues to drive me and give me passion is in our industry, being able to show people that perspective, that uniqueness. And so, yeah, that's what's kept me in it. And I love what I do.
What I guess one of the first ways that people started monetizing it was for aerial shots for real estate. 'Cause we've got
Correct.
you go in a house with a still camera and you shoot those shots. We get that, the kitchen, the master bedroom, master bath, all that. But then people wanted aerial shots. What were some of the other initial monetizations for you and drones in that industry?
Right. So another big thing is tower surveys, looking at large scale communications towers. The reason for that is it's awfully hard to fly a normal fixed winged aircraft close enough, or even a rotor aircraft like a helicopter close enough with guide wires and things like that. Well, you can take a drone and you can put a drone right next to a communications tower, staying away from those guide wires, keeping everybody on the ground safe. And so the other thing was tower surveys was the big kind of push into that, besides real estate and things like that were up in the air, not only communications towers, but any kind of large structure where you did not want to put a standardized aircraft next to it.
When you were surveying these towers, would you just when you got your drone going, did you just raise it up next to the tower the whole way? Do you go out? How do you get to where the point on the
So
tower
it
you
it
need?
depends, right? We always have a flight plan, and it depends on kind of what the client wants. Some clients have a specific area that they want to focus in on. They feel like they've got a issue on a certain section, and so we can just fly right in and look at that section. Or sometimes they'll literally want the entire scope of it. So we would actually fly and we do a loop around to make sure everything looks solid from what we can see from as we kind of concentrically close in on that structure. Then what we do is focus on those different parts, and then we could actually go right up next to the tower and do a full length tower. And the great thing is, in the aviation community, we as drone pilots have the ability to work within that airspace with some restrictions, obviously, but within that airspace to do what we need to do as far as going all the way up to the top of that tower, going above it, and then coming back down.
When you are doing an inspection on a tower like that, is this a one-person job? How many people do you have with you?
Well, normally when we fly a job like that, we have at least two people. We have a pilot in command who's actually flying the drone itself, and then we also have a spotter. And the spotter is there to make sure that the pilot's going to be focused on actually what's going on with the drone, and then the spotter is the one who's making sure that we stay away from other things that we don't need to be running into, looking out for other objects, looking out for wildlife. You'd be surprised how many large birds don't like drones, and so we have to work with that sometimes. A great video I saw not too long ago was actually when a large hawk literally pulled a drone right out of the sky. So it really does matter to have that spotter there. So at least a two-person team in a situation like that. And then if we can have a third, we'd have a third on the ground, making sure that the ground crew is taken care of, making sure that people aren't, coming up and disturbing what's going on with the pilot in command or the spotter. So yeah, there's different roles that we have depending on what the client needs are.
So I imagine your Maverick and your spotter is Goose, right?
That's a good way to look at it.
Okay,
Yep,
all right, just
absolutely.
making sure, because
Yep,
yeah, because I figure if you're flying, the last thing you're doing is looking at anything else.
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
That's exactly right. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and you record all this for the client?
That is correct. We shoot it in high resolution video so that they can go back and replay it and take a look at it and see. And because it is such high resolution imagery, they can actually zoom in on that video and make a really good determination on what they need to see.
If they have a, let's say, a 200-foot tower, so before drones got here, if they felt like there was something wrong at the 80-foot mark on their tower, how did they get up there and see that prior to
That
you?
they would do a couple different things. The first thing is they would try to, if they could fly around it. They could get an aerial photographer and put them in a plane, put them in a fixed wing aircraft, take a really large telephoto lens and try to zoom in. And I can tell you, as someone who works with aerial photography with the Civil Air Patrol, trying to get that kind of shot and steady that camera is a tough thing to do. So then the other option was to actually put a human being on the tower and climb it. And these are the guys that get paid 20 or $30,000 to do that. And God bless them, because I can tell you, I love to fly. I love to be in an aircraft. I love to fly drones. You will never see me on the side of a 2,000-foot tower. It's not going to happen. But that's what they do. They have a tower climber and they go inspect it. But obviously, you can think, when you're spending those kind of dollars, when you're talking thousands of dollars, to put somebody on the tower versus quite a bit less than that to actually have us come out and fly, it's a big difference. So yeah, the industry has changed a lot because of drones.
Well, and then you've got to record it on video, because if the guy's climbing up there, he might get a couple of pictures, but probably not checked out as a really
That's
good
right. You put a
photographer.
tower climber up, you tell them, hey, take the video, take the picture. What did you see? And then in the earliest days, they were relying on the description, and they would have, from what I understand, I've talked to some of these guys, they would actually draw out what they saw, because this was before really digital photography existed. And so, they'd come back and the camera, the light wouldn't be right or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, it really has made a huge difference for
Wow.
what people do when it comes
Oh,
to tower survey.
I love that. Before we get back to this, how did you come up with the name, the Tarva Group?
That's a great question. I love answering this. So if you're a literary fan, you've got the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yep.
In the Chronicles of Narnia, there is a book, one of the series called Prince Caspian. In the book, if you go and you grab the movie and say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do my research, I'm going to watch the movie. It's not in the movie, so you got to read the book. But in the book Prince Caspian, there is two celestial bodies, Tarva and Ambrel. And when those two celestial bodies come into conjunction, it signifies success in the future. So that is why we say the Tarva Group strategy for success, because we see it as an alignment with your business, a partnership, not a vendorship, but a partnership with your business for your success in the future.
And the other name with Tarva was what?
Ambrel was the other celestial
That would have
body.
been a hard one to explain to people in a
See,
meeting.
exactly.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
Ambrel. Yeah,
yep.
no.
How do you spell that? I wrote down, yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Good,
exactly.
good.
Believe it or not, we have tough enough time with Tarva.
Yeah, but a good name. I like that. I'm always intrigued by how people come up with their company name, and that's good stuff. All right, so let's bring in the FAA to your world.
Yes,
They wanted a piece of the pie here, and they wanted to make sure things were right. So we know that you can't fly near an airport. So
correct,
we kind of knew that from the beginning, but now
correct.
there's even more restrictions that they want on you guys to do this right, correct?
Correct. So there are several different things. Depends on the airspace, right? The area around an airport is a different class of airspace than what you normally have every day. In what's called Class G airspace, which without giving everyone a list in an airspace, I can just say that most airspace, except for around the airport, is Class G airspace. When you're talking about larger airports, Class A, smaller airports, but a little smaller class B, class C, and so on. And you can still, if you need to, you can request authorization and get it if you have a legitimate reason to be flying in an more restrictive airspace. But yes, the FAA qualifies the airspace. The FAA lets us know where we can and can't fly in that sense. And we can request a waiver. We can request authorization if we need to. But yes, they very much want to be involved in that. And there's a reason for that. The reason is safety. It comes down to ultimately safety. We are restricted as pilots in the drone world to fly no greater than 400 feet above ground level, or what's called AGL. And the reason for that is because they want a nice buffer between the where we fly area and where a small single engine aircraft would fly. And so most aircraft, unless they have a really good reason, they're not going to drop below 1,000 feet on a regular basis, like a single engine Cessna or Piper or something like that. So that gives a little bit of buffer there. Of course, if we have a reason to go above that, we can. If they have a reason to go below that, they can. But that way, there gives a buffer there, and they help control that airspace. And so there's a couple different ways. One is they obviously have the regulations that are in place. No ways they have the waivers and stuff that you have to do. And then the other thing is they've introduced, and it's going to be coming in September, remote ID requirements as well for drones. So large drones that weigh 400 grams or greater are going to actually have to have remote ID capability, meaning that they're going to produce a remote signal that will actually give their identification away. So if, say, you fly into an area where you're not supposed to be, they're going to be able to pull that remote ID, and they're going to be able to ultimately track it back to the manufacturer, who intends going to track it back to you. So they're going to figure out who you are. So I always tell people it's best to follow the rules. Everybody wins that way.
Yeah, and you and I have had a couple of conversations on this, and I know you run across that, we'll just call him Arrogant John. Arrogant John's like, "Yeah, man, I can fly those things. I don't need the FAA. I'm never around anybody or anything." And they tend to the authorities tend to they're starting to find people like him real quick, aren't they?
That's exactly right. So one of the things that you have to understand remote ID is it's going to be transmitted all the way down to your first responders. So they're going to be able to track you down. It's one of those things where you really need to make sure that you're doing the right things for the right reasons, and being safe about it. I always have had these conversations like with the Arrogant Johns. That's a great way to say it, where people say, "Well, I'm going to fly my drone where I want to." No, it doesn't work that way.
It
You're
did,
gonna you need
right?
to fly your drone
Yeah,
where you need to,
yeah.
you know?
But, yeah, a couple of years ago, it did. He could pretty
Right.
much he could fly it in more places than he can today just because he wanted
Ab
to. Yep.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is, and the good thing is the FAA has created systems in place to help work within that community, as much as they
Yeah.
can. It's one of those things where, like I say, you can request a waiver. If you're going to be flying in a certain area, you can request a flight authorization. So there's different ways that you can go about it legally and the right way. Their biggest thing is they don't want people on the ground hurt,
Yep.
and they definitely don't want people doing things illegal with their drones. There's been a lot of times I've had conversations with people say, well, should I worry about my neighbor flying my drone in over my property and swooping down and seeing my wife who's, sunbathing on the back deck? Well, if you see a drone over your house, then yeah, you need to call the authorities, and find out what's going on with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I've actually been in neighborhoods before flying for clients for different reasons, and had people come up to me and say, "Hey, listen, what are you doing?" And they're super polite when they do it, but I have the authorizations. I know why I'm there. I explain that to local responders, and they say, "You know what? Have a great flight." And one thing I always tell people is, and this goes back to your Arrogant John, sometimes you have your arrogant ground team members too. They say, well, I'll just shoot the drone out of the air.
Yep.
Don't do that. It's
Yep.
a federal crime to shoot a drone out of the air. So
And that's
let's
where
save
yep.
everybody the trouble there. Just don't do that.
So that yeah.
Nobody wins there.
Yeah. All right, so I wanted to go there next, but I wanna go back to the point you made that when, neighbors come out and they walk up to you, you're all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. It's much like business insurance and homeowners and renters, we're all guilty of this. People say, "Oh, yeah, I'm here to we have an $89 special. We'll come in and look at all your, AC units, and we'll look at your house, and, oh, 89 bucks, great, come on in." And they never ask for insurance, and some of these companies don't have insurance. So That's the first red flag for anybody if they're watching somebody like you in a neighborhood one day and they walk up and you or your one of your competitors says, "Lady, get away from me. I know what I'm doing." That's a big red flag, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the great thing is that even the insurance community has come under, more advisement as far as how they can help us in the drone community. They have things before you just had business insurance, but now you can actually have individualized what's called whole insurance, where each actual drone we insure differently based on the usage of the drone. And so if something were to happen while we're out in the field, we have that whole insurance that not only covers the drone, which is great for us, but it also covers anything that the drone may come in contact with. And so that's helpful for those that we're, flying for and flying around.
All right, Amnon had a great question. If you, because you're a certified pilot, if you see a drone hovering around your house one day, can you get your drone out and go chat with his or her drone and scare them away?
That's a great question. I've often thought if I ever see one, what would I do? I think honestly, yeah, I would. I would probably put mine in the air and I would find out, I would trace it back and find out where the pilot is sitting or standing, and I'd go have a chat with him. Yeah, absolutely.
So you, because one of the things I did learn doing my research is the drone pilot has got to be line of sight.
That is
So
correct.
right, so
That
you
is
can't
correct.
stand in front of your house and fly your drone a quarter mile away down the other street in your neighborhood just because you wanna mess with one of your neighbors.
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah, if you do, of course you can do anything, but I would
Yeah,
not advise that.
yeah.
Correct, because you're at that point, you're outside of the restrictions and requirements. Yes.
Now, all my research also told me that I could not jam a frequency of a drone.
That is also correct. Yes.
Then really, if I'm at my in my backyard one day and I see a drone staying there way too long, which is like about 3 seconds, the only thing I can really do is call the police.
Yeah, just call local law enforcement. Say I've got a drone over my property. I'm not flying it. I don't know who is, but can you send a unit out and check it out, please? Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh,
Let them handle.
do you know if they're starting to get a lot more calls like that?
That's a good question. I think that as the community continues to expand, with drones, I think you're going to see more and more calls like that. I don't hear a whole lot of chatter, working with law enforcement. They get a whole lot of those calls yet, because I think a lot of people are, quite frankly, a little fearful of losing that drone and getting in trouble. But if
Mhm.
you've got those people, the more that it's like anything else, the more cars you put on the highway, the more accidents you're going to have. The more drones that you put in the air, the more you're going to have these calls where people are doing things they're not supposed to be doing. And sometimes it's legitimately an innocent thing where the drone got away from them and they're like, I have no idea where my drone is. I've talked to somebody who was a recreational flyer and he said, I was flying one day and I lost his signal. And the next thing I know, my neighbor's bringing my drone up to me. He's upset. Why did it land in his yard? And he tried to explain to him, and I said, well, that's what you just tell him, say, this is what happened. And the neighbor in a very creative and, we'll just say, mild mannered way, let him know, do not do this again. And he said, and I'm not going to, because I know I was an
Yeah.
idiot and I shouldn't have tried to push the limits. And so, yeah, I think the more that you see those novice flyers out there, you're going to run into some craziness like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I would not bring that drone back to you a second time, right? If it got away
Right.
from you once, I saw it again. Nah, I haven't seen
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, and that's the other thing is, by the way the FAA rules work, you're supposed to actually have your FAA registration number, just like fixed wing aircraft have a registration number, drones
Oh,
have a registration number, and you're actually supposed to have that registration number on the side of your drone. And so if a drone would land on my property, I'd look at that registration. First of all, I'd see if it's registered or not. If
yeah.
not, they're in violation of that part. If they are registered and I've got that registration number, I can reach out to local law enforcement. I can, let them know here's the registration number, and they can trace that back through the FAA and find out whose drone that is, and then either get it back to them and then or ask them why in the world was it there. Yeah.
It's interesting when I was, after you and I talked the other day about having you on, and I was doing some research, I was trying to think if I've seen one, and I live in a neighborhood with a bunch of trees, um, and I can't recall seeing one in the air, so I don't know how common that is with people just doing stupid stuff in a neighborhood.
Yeah, if you live in a neighborhood with trees, the good news is that a lot of rookie pilots wouldn't dare attempt that. That they when they go out, they spend three, four, five, $600 for even the smallest of the drones, unless it's a little toy drone. And those aren't going to go beyond their property anyway. They just don't have the range. You're going to be okay if you live in it's these new. Honestly, we see it a lot more in these new housing developments that have gone up in the middle of like a farm field
Yep.
where the developers come in and literally put up 200 houses in the middle of the field. There's no trees. And, someone from the neighborhood over is now flying their drone. And now it's, what in the world? And yeah, that's where we see a lot of that.
Can I throw a rock at one, hoping their camera's not on?
I guess so. Since we're going to be celebrating the 4th of July, I mean, if you really want to have a leftover, item there, then
I could see on
I
a
was just
yeah,
shooting off fireworks,
I
sir.
know. I could see on October 10th a drone gets shot down, and my explanation to the police was, "We had some bottle rockets left over, some Roman candles left over, having a little
That's
fun.
right.
Who knew a drone was gonna fly by at the same time?"
Who knew? That's right. Who knew? That's right. We're just celebrating the holiday, sir. That's all. Yeah.
Oh, it's like Canada Day or Denmark Day, makeup a day, right? I mean, who's gonna
That's
know?
right. That's
But
right.
I would imagine there have been some very tense conversations between people
Oh,
when a drone showed up.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It does happen. It does
Um,
happen.
man. Alright, so one of my favorite questions to ask people on the show, that are married is your wife's name is Emily. So I always
Yes.
like to ask, how did you 2 meet, and do you both tell the story the same way?
How do we meet? And will we both tell it the same way? Sure. We actually met through a church at the time where I was there at the church and she was there. So when we both met, the funny story is this. When we met, I actually went up to her and said, "Hey, how are you?" And she introduced herself. And I grew up, and when I grew up, I took a National League of Junior Cotillion course, and they always taught us when we shake hands with a woman, never extend your hand first as a man. Let them extend it first. So I was trying to apply some courtesy there, and so I did not extend my hand to shake hers. Well, I found out later that when we first met, she said, "I thought you were really stuck up," and I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because you never even tried to shake my hand." And I said, "Well, I thought you were gonna extend your hand." And she said, "Well, I was just waiting on you." And so we had this moment where it's like, we were both meeting there for the first time, but we ended up, despite being that way with one another, becoming friends, and then ultimately getting married, and now we've got 2 kids. So yeah, life is good.
So where was the first date?
The first date, that's a great question. The first date for us, I believe it was actually we went on. I can tell you the first. I think if I get, and she'd have to ask her, but on the order of this, but we went bowling and we went to play golf. And I'm not a super competitive person, but I enjoy those things. So in the community we lived, there wasn't a whole lot to do dating wise. So we went bowling first. Well, she beat the junk out of me bowling. And I thought, well, I've got to redeem myself. So let's go play golf. And then she beat the pants off of me when it came to golf. And so finally, after the third round, I looked at her and I said, "Let me tell you something." I said, "I was going to take you bowling and I was going to let you win, but I was trying to keep up with you. Same thing with golf." And she said, "Well, Lee," she said, "there's only a couple things to do around here. I was on my high school golf team, so I know how to play golf, and I'm not decent. I'm not bad bowling because that's the only thing to do." And I said, "Well, we're going to play tennis next time, just so that just so that I can get a win out of it." And we did, and I did win. So at least that way, I could redeem myself on the third date.
And where did you guys grow up?
I grew up in Raleigh, and she was born in Tennessee, and she moved slowly towards the east. And I jokingly said, if I hadn't have stopped her, we met in Pinehurst. If I hadn't have stopped her, she would eventually ended up in the ocean and drowned.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I caught her, in Pinehurst. But she grew up, she lived in Robbinsville, North Carolina, and then in Rockingham, and then ultimately in Pinehurst where we
Okay.
met. So that was another connection point because she said, "Well, I lived in the town called Robbinsville." I said, "Oh, Joyce Kilmer National Forest. I know exactly where that is." She said, "You've been to Robbinsville?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "We camped a lot growing up, and my dad loved to travel. And so, yeah, I've been out there." And she said, "I have never, ever met anyone who knows where Robbinsville is." Well, you have now.
And how far into this relationship did you think, "Ooh, I think there's something here?"
Um, We had been friends for a couple years and kind of just hung out in groups, and then we literally just started hanging out kind of one on one. And I remember we were sitting in the car one night after we had gone to dinner, and she looked at me and she said, "You know what? I think we need to do a little TDR." And I said, "TDR?" And she said, "Define the relationship." And I
Ah,
said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "You know what?" She said, "Let's just be honest for a minute. We've been dating for a while now, and we just hadn't called it dating, but let's call it what it is. And obviously you enjoy it and I enjoy it, and I enjoy your company and you enjoy my company. So I'm okay with that. And you're okay with that, obviously. And so let's call it what it is. We're dating." And I said, "Okay, I'm good with that. We'll go there." So yeah, it was definitely something where having the friendship there first made a big
yep.
difference, and the connection points there made a huge difference. And so yeah, it just slowly became what it was and is, and yeah, moving on.
Now, there's not very many other names that are easier than Smith. What was her maiden name?
It was Davidson before.
So, okay. Oh,
Yeah,
eh,
so I asked
yeah,
her when we started talking about, the more serious things and into the marriage situation. I said, "Well, how are you going to feel about being anonymous now?"
yeah,
And she said, "To be honest, it's going to be kind of nice." I said, "Because you're going to go from a somebody to like a
yeah,
nobody.
yeah,
I mean, because in the phone book,
yeah,
what can you say? Smith and Jones. That's about
yeah.
it. Yeah,
And
or
we're
Johnson, I guess."
yeah, a couple weeks ago, our, nephew graduated from Leesville High School, so we're at the graduation ceremony, and you've got they hand you the flyer or whatever, it's got all the names of the people in there, and you're right with Smith, there's, like of course, that class was 544 people. I'm thinking there's probably about 25 Smiths in there. So
Exactly. Exactly.
that's good. The other thing I really like that you do is you are the senior chaplain for the Garner Police Department.
That is correct. Yes.
You have done some other jobs, financial services officer at State Employees Credit Union, general manager at a tailored lawn was the name of the company. Or how does your yard look at your house today?
Right now, it looks really great.
Okay.
It needs a little mulch, but other than that, the
Alright.
grass is cut and trimmed. What do they always say about landscaping? It's like the cobbler's kids. They're
Yeah.
the ones that without shoes.
Yeah.
When I was doing landscaping, my yard probably did not look the best because I was spending all the energy on everybody else's.
Yep.
Um, but no, that was a great experience just in management. And someone described me one time as a high mileage vehicle. They said you crammed a lot into almost 45 years of life. And I said, I'd like to think of it that way too. I really enjoy life experiences, and I feel very blessed that I've had a lot and been able to travel and understand the value of relationships and understand the value of networking. And through my different experiences in the job market, I've seen that, whether it be in financial services or whether it be, in management experience in the technology sector, and different areas. Really, everything that you do obviously gives you a different perspective. And Steve Jobs, he once said, "I'm, either you love Apple products or you hate them." I actually like the way that they're built. I like the way they're designed, and so for years I've had them and own stock in Apple and think it's a pretty good
There
company.
you go.
But everybody's got an opinion, right? So, but no, he said one time, the broader one's understanding of the human experience, the better design we will have, and he applied that to obviously what he does. And I think the broader the experience that we have in life, the better the design we will have as far as being able to work with one another and serve one another. And so, for me, having those different experiences made a big difference in what we do here, as far as we see ourselves as a partner with other organizations and groups. And so for us, yeah, I mean, it is about being able to do that and the life experience in that. And yeah, and I mean, it comes in handy too. I know I went to a a banking institution the other day, and they were saying, well, I had actually given them a check, and they said, well, we're going to need to put a hold on this, because this is a really big check. And I was like, okay, well, how long is the hold? And they told me, and I said, well, just call and verify funds. And the teller looked at me and says, well, we can't do that. And I said, what do you mean you can't do that? And she said, we can't do that. And I said, well, I worked in financial services for a season, and I said, I know I can pick up the telephone and call and verify the check. You know, would you like me to help you do that? And immediately the tone changed, and
Yeah.
she said, yep, hang on just one second, I'll take care of that. So having that experience way back then definitely helped out to be able to say, hey, and that's what I mean. I mean, it is
Yeah.
about life experience and
Yeah.
being able to apply those different things to what you need to do. And so yeah, so I've been very much enjoyed the experience and love what I do with chaplaincy. I've been involved in nonprofit organizations and in churches my whole life, and chaplaincy is something where you see a different side of the community than you would in any other way. And I love that. I love being able to serve the community that way. I love to be able to serve the department that I work with in that way. Um, you know, I just enjoy being around people, and I enjoy being around and being able to serve them. And you get to see people at their best when you're in business a lot of times, and then you get to help people when sometimes they're at their worst when you're doing chaplaincy, where they're dealing with grief or they're dealing with a struggle within the family or whatever. And I really enjoy that, and that's given me a talking about perspective again. That's given me a perspective that I had never had before in the work that I had done. Being able to sit on the side of literally a bridge on a major highway with a young person who had contemplated jumping off that bridge, and being able to sit down with them literally on the concrete and say, I'm here, talk to me, tell me what I can do to help you, and let's try to get you the resourcing that you need so that your life can get turned back around. And then to have the parent call 3 4 weeks later and say, I don't know how and why you were there. I'm not gonna say why, other than that I know there's a higher power that exists that put you there. But thank you for being there, because your presence there made the difference in my daughter's life.
Good. Good.
What can you do with that?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
that's the kind of thing that you can't you how can you put a price on that kind of relationship and that kind of experience? And that's what I love about chaplaincy and what it does for me.
You used to be the executive pastor at Shiloh Baptist Church. Do you remember, and I grew up Catholic, so I'm gonna call it a sermon. Do you remember the first sermon that you had to write and do?
Yeah, the first sermon that I had to write, let's see, that's a great
And how
question.
nervous were you, do you think?
Actually, believe it or not, I was not that nervous to write it. Public speaking has always been something that everybody else gets nervous about. I
Mm.
never have gotten nervous about that. I think
I'm with you.
because I grew up speaking in the church. I was really involved in my church growing up at First Baptist in Cary. And so I remember being sixth grader going up and speaking in front of the group about the Royal Ambassador program. And, this was a large congregation. And so from my early days, I was always involved in that side of public speaking. So it didn't make me nervous. I do remember the first sermon I ever wrote. It was out of the Gospel of John, because um, John is always a great great go to. And I just remember thinking to myself, I hope I don't misquote anything. I hope I don't misquote anything. And so, and my when I preach, I always tell people my job is to keep you awake, and hopefully the Holy Spirit's going to do the rest. So if I keep you awake, then I'm going to put that on God to take care of the rest of it. And so yeah, that's one of those things that yeah, I've always enjoyed doing that as well. So when people ask me to speak, on behalf of the business, talk about drones, and they say, "Are you nervous about that?" No, I'm
Yeah.
good. I don't
Right.
mind that at all.
Alright, so
It's
how
it's I'll tell you what I told our local group when I did my 10-minute presentation. They said, "Well, you got it coming up. Do you need what do we need to know?" And I said, "To be honest, I'm used to speaking a lot more than 10 minutes.
Yep.
So for me to be able to condense it down to 10 minutes, that's going to be the challenge. It's not going to be saying stuff. It's going to be the reverse of that.
So we've
Getting
had
it.
the other pastor in the group on the show, Steve Grice, with Grice Insurance Solutions. We'll give him a good plug. Same thing. The first time that we started doing that, he goes, "Ooh, I don't know if I keep it to 10 minutes."
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, all
Absolutely.
right. So let's apply my goal is to keep you awake to BNI. So when you're doing your 10-minute presentation, your goal is to keep us awake, but who's the closer in that group in church? the Holy Spirit, so you're a closer. Who's a closer in our BNI group?
Yeah, that's a good point. I always have thought if I would do this with drones and I would just have a drone like flying right
Mhm.
next to me the whole time,
Yep,
the closer would be the drone just to fly out and see how many people are still dodging the drone, on the
yep.
way out the door.
I like that.
But but no, I think just to, when I share what we do,
Yep,
to just help them understand. And honestly, I do a lot with video and photography in that experience. And honestly, I always say, a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 10,000.
oh, yeah.
And so to be able to show the video, and I'll tell you, when I did that in my 10-minute presentation, they said, Lee, I understand what you do, but wow, do I get it now?
Mhm.
Because I showed them a video that I shot, actually flew it at Dorothea Dix Park, where we start out on the grass and then we rise up to the tree line. And as we get higher and higher, more of the city becomes apparent. As you go all the way up to the peak of that
Yep.
400-foot level, then the city really begins to expand, and you see that perspective. And so they get literally, and so they said that video, wow, that was the closer, then.
Yep. And if we've learned anything from news in the last few years, that video changes everything, doesn't it?
It
Because
does.
you can
It
hear,
does.
"Oh, somebody said this happened." Okay, and all of a sudden you see the video of it, it's like, "Ooh, okay, that changes the
Yeah,
conversation." So,
absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
if somebody listening or watching the show today is thinking about getting a drone, because they've always wanted to do it, they've tried a couple of them, they had a friend who had one, whatever it was, and they enjoyed that. What are the first couple things they need to do to stay out of conversations with the law?
Okay. The first thing is, remember the line of sight rule.
Yep.
Remember where you're flying. Don't fly it over property that you don't possess. That's the easiest thing. I always tell people, there are a lot of great places that you can go fly your drone. Obviously, other than your private property, there are parks that have drone areas there where you can fly nice open fields where you can
Oh,
practice. So I always tell people, do a little research near you, find out what parks are available, find out what open space is available, or if you've got somewhere that you think, hey, this would be great, go up to the property owner, make contact with him, say, listen, I've got this new drone, I want to try flying it. Do you mind if I? And see what they say. Some people may say no, thank you. Other people will say, hey, you look, just don't run into anything. You're
yeah.
fine. But know that you need to be flying in an area where you've got permission from the property owner, or it's your property is the easy way to
Cool.
do it. And then the other thing is kind of, stay out of water, stay out of trees. you know, and I always tell people that because I actually gave this as an example in BNI one morning, that there was a person I knew that was flying a new drone that they had bought over the lake, and they were trying to get some shots of them out on their boat, and all of a sudden the drone ended up in the lake, and they said, I don't understand, I thought I was high enough off the water. And I said, well, you have to understand, with drones, they don't have human eyeballs, they have electronics in them that tell them what height they are. Well, a lake is like, when the sun beats down on it, is like a natural mirror. It reflects. And the drone gave the wrong altitude only by a few feet, but he was flying so close to the water that those few feet mattered. And he ended up with a very wet drone. And at that point, it becomes a great story to tell and a model on the shelf because they don't make drones yet that fly well once they've been wet.
And
So,
going back to your Apple example, you can't put a drone in a bag of rice and it dries out, you can use it, right?
that's correct. Believe it or not, he said, I put my drone in a bag of rice, but it didn't work the same way as my phone. And I said, you're right, it did not, and it will not. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah,
But
ju
but
yeah.
but I will tell you that if you fly them enough, you get used to it. I actually have a drone that has, believe it or not, has water skids on it, and I can actually land it on the water if I need to. I don't
Nice.
recommend that. I recommend you fly several hundred hours before you get to that point.
Yep,
But it can be done. But that's the other thing I always tell people: practice what you're doing. There's a actually guy in our BNI group who was getting a drone last week, and he said, "Hey, listen, I'm getting this. What do I need to know?" And I gave him kind of the 30,000 foot view, broad strokes kind of thing. I said the key thing is just practice with it.
yep,
Just practice with it where you don't. And I said, and I've got a program that I can run through with you. We can get together one on one, and I can give you some skills that you can go through. But really the key is to know where you're flying. And people think, oh, well, I'll be fine. I've got this really nice drone with object avoidance on it. Again, those are not eyeballs, those are electronics. And so what it thinks is an object avoidance issue may not be, and vice versa. So, it really is something where you just need to use your own common sense and your own vision and understand, if you fly really, I mean, object avoidance works great in a drone when you've got a tree or a building there. But when you've got a guide wire or a cable running to your house that's, the size of a quarter, it's not going to see that most likely. At least some of them don't. And so you don't want to impact that. That would be a bad day for you and a bad day for the power company.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and the neighborhood because their power's out because you were a
That's
knucklehead,
right.
yeah.
That's right. So
No,
the key, when people go buy one, I always tell them, just go buy one. Always understand this too. You're going to break something on a drone. As you learn to fly, whether it be a propeller or whether it be you're going to crash it. Um, I had, to tell a funny story. One of our BNI members, I was actually out on site with him the other day. Um, even those of us who have been flying for years get stupid from time to time. I was standing there, I was hand launching the drone. There's a way that you hand launch it safely. I was standing there, I was talking to him, I was launching it. You're supposed to do it open palm. What did I do? I got my finger too close to it. The next thing I know, the propeller comes around and it slices my finger open. And
oh,
here I am. And what did I do? I dropped the drone.
yeah.
know? And this is a $3,000 drone. And I'm
Yeah.
going, oh my word. And he looks at me, he says, what are you going to do? And I said, well, if worst case scenario, I'm going to go to my backup drone who's in the truck. And he said, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'll be fine. I went and got the first aid kit out and wrapped it up. So
Yep.
we all do stupid stuff from time to time.
More
But
yeah,
just to be safe about what you're doing and understand that you are putting yourself, when you put something like that in the air, you are putting yourself at risk, of it coming out of the air. It's kind of like the old adage. You've probably seen the news article that came out recently. Hey, it's July 4th. Please don't go outside and shoot guns up in the air.
yeah,
The bullets come back down somewhere.
yeah.
You put a drone up in the air, it's going to come down one way or the other. Either you're going to bring it down or it's going to fall down. So just be aware of the liability and be aware of where you're flying. And that's why I tell people have fun with it, but understand there's going to be some rules that you have to follow.
Yep.
Common sense and safety yearly.
So when when that blade, when the propeller hit your finger, your ego was more bruised than that finger, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. I literally said to myself, "You idiot! You know better, you idiot! What were you thinking?" And yeah, and it's interesting. There was a company that did a test not too long ago, when the FAA released some of their authorizations on flying drones above people, because a lot of people say, "Well, why does it really matter?" They're so far up. Because those blades spin at such a high rate. I mean, it will slice flesh.
Yep.
And I saw the video and I watched it and I thought, man, that'll do some damage. Not knowing 3 weeks later I was going to test the thing with my finger, and I can tell you that it'll do damage. Yeah. So I'm gonna have a nice scar, from it. But other than that,
Yeah.
it'll be all right.
We've been putting Lee's phone number up on the screen during the show. If you are in need of some very good aerial footage, they can put it together in a marketing piece, still photography, aerial photography, video, all that good stuff. Please reach out to him for that. And Lee, each show I have a couple of notes that I put down on my spreadsheet just to remember, because this is episode like 204 and, I'm old. So I like the fact that you are Maverick and your spotter is Goose. So that'll be one. And then I believe forever and ever and ever, Lee, I'm going to remember the cotillion handshake.
There you go. That's right. That's right. The cotillion handshake.
I
Yep.
look forward to meeting Emily one day and asking her version of that, which probably will
And
be.
she will probably tell you the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. She's like, when we first met, he was so
Yeah,
stuck up.
yeah. I sense the way you describe her. She's probably a pretty decent storyteller. So I bet it'll be pretty good, right?
She is. She is. You get her talking. I would love to see what the explanation is.
There you
Yeah.
go. All right, folks, if you're ever in Smithfield on a Tuesday morning at 8:15, want to go see some of the professionals in that area, business owners and sales professionals you need to meet to grow your business or start a business, please come by and visit. And we've been putting Lee's number on the screen there, so give him a call if you need stuff. Lee, appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you again, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity.
And we'll see everybody next time on Triangle BNI.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.